So we're halfway done with the review at this point. We have 6 more questions to go, and they're kind of mixed. We start with another example of a problem that asks us to write the equation of the line, and that gives us 2 points. Notice it wants it in slope-intercept form. We know that that's y is equal to mx plus b. And since I'm given 2 points, I know I will need to calculate my slope and my y-intercept in order to write this equation. Now, every time I'm asked to write the equation of a line, I know I will need those 2 things. First, I find the slope, then I find the y-intercept. I use the slope formula to find the slope every time. There is the slope formula, and there are my 2 points. So what I want to do is I want to label those points so that I don't lose track of them. What you can't do here is mix points up. When students make a mistake here, they will take the y2 point and then they'll do something like subtract the x2 point from it. Or they'll take y2 minus y1, but then they'll take x1 minus x2. You have to make sure that you keep track of things and that you're very careful about how you put these in. In this case, notice you again have that double negative. That's where putting things in parentheses helps us. When I do the math on this, I ultimately get that the slope is a 4. Now that I have the slope, I have an m value, and since I have 2 points, I can use one of those 2 points, whichever one I choose, to give myself a y value and an x value, and then I can solve this for b. Solving for a letter means that I get it by itself on one side of the equal sign, and that tells me what the value of that letter is. In this case, I fill in all my values, my y, my m, and my x. I start to do the math. When I do the math, I will ultimately get that 8 is equal to b. So now I know that my slope is a 4, my y-intercept or b value is an 8, and now I can write the equation. Y is equal to 4x plus 8, and that's all there is to it. I'm done. Moving along then to number 8. The question type that's shown here in number 8, this is one of the most difficult question types that we have on this test. I say it's difficult because it's the one that I have seen the most struggles with. Remember, an arithmetic sequence, though, is just a sequence of numbers that have a common difference added to each number. They go on forever. The thing that's throwing people off, I think, a lot here is this simplified formula. So you want to make sure and pay attention to how to get the simplified formula here. And then we're going to find the 28th term of the sequence ultimately. So we have 3 inputs that we need. Notice when we look at these numbers, there is a common difference between 3 and 19 of 16. I could take 19 minus 3 to get that. Notice if I took 35 minus 19, I'd also get 16, and 51 minus 35 also gives me 16. My common difference is 16. So simplified formula. Well, I'm going to take the original formula that I'm given here, which is a little complicated, and I'm going to simplify it. Anytime that I simplify an equation, I'm always going to distribute and combine like terms. That's what it means to simplify, to just clean an equation up so that I distribute into all parentheses and I combine any terms that are alike. So here I'm going to put my values in, 3 for a sub 1 because that's the very first term, 16 for d, which is the common difference, and then I'm going to leave in alone right there in the formula. Now I need to simplify this by using distribution. So I take 16 times n and 16 times negative 1. A lot of you have been forgetting the second multiplication there that takes place in a distribution. Then I need to combine like terms. I have 2 numbers there that I can put together. 3 minus 16 gives me minus 13, and then I write plus 16n, and that is my simplified formula or simplified expression. Once I have that, I can easily plug the 28th term into the n value and then have Desmos calculate it for me. Negative 13 plus 16 times 28. If you're doing this by hand or on a separate calculator, you must do the multiplication before you do the addition. You can't add negative 13 and 16 here and then multiply. Yet you have to make sure that you put this in a calculator just like that, or that you do the multiplication between 16 and 28 first. When you do this correctly, what you're going to end up with is 435. It's a big number, but that's the 28th term of that sequence, and that's my answer. Moving on. Question 9 is one that we've all done pretty well with. This is a mix and match problem. We'll zoom out a little ways. You'll drag and drop answer choices within Edulastic. This is likely to be something you see on this year's STAR test, by the way. The big thing is to know, are they asking me for perpendicular lines or parallel lines? And notice, I don't have to use every choice in the answer bank. I'm only going to use some of them. That's something that you're going to see on a lot of STAR tests, by the way. So you want to make sure that you're reading these questions and reading the directions. Now, in order for a line to be perpendicular, I'm looking only at the slope of the line, the number in front of the x. We call that a coefficient. And I'm looking for two things. Is that number opposite and reciprocal? Opposite means that if it was a negative, like -3, it needs to turn positive. And reciprocal means that, okay, if it's a 3, it needs to be flipped to 1/3. And so those are the two things I'm looking for, opposite and reciprocal. So it needs to change sign and it needs to flip. So when I look at something like -1/13, the opposite of -1/13 is 1/13. -1/13 is negative, so I make it positive. And then now I need to make it reciprocal. That means I have to flip it. I'm going to take 1/13 and flip it to 13/1, and that's the same as saying 13. I look in my answer choices. Do I have an equation with a slope of 13? I do, right there. I'm going to drag and drop that right up into the box. I'm going to make sure that that equation does say positive 13, not negative 13 or 1/13. But I'll drag that up, and then notice one at a time. 3/5, the opposite of that, and reciprocal is -5/3. So I'll drag that value up as well. The opposite and reciprocal of -5/2 is positive